Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tap Into the Truth. This is our part 2 of the broadcast on the topic of, is America going to war with Iran? Like I said at the opening of the first episode tonight, now as we broadcasted, there was a lot of information to go through and sort through, and there still is. And now we're getting to the crux of tonight's topic. So let's go ahead and get into these news stories and find out exactly why I asked the question. Because as you will see, it seems like Iran is already at war with us. First of all, we start off with the Russian leading news publication, Pravda. Recently, they had a poignant assertion that while communism has failed miserably in their country, the recent U.S. presidential election demonstrated that it has scored a victory in America. A November editorial titled Barack Obama's Soviet Mistake observed that while Vladimir Putin's re-election signified a popular determination to keep the New World Order agenda out of Russia, Barack Obama did the opposite. The commentary presents a very dim view of the, quote, illiterate society that voted to award Barack Obama a second term. People who were influenced by continuing lies of less taxes while he raises them, and speeches of peace and love in the world as he promotes war, as he did in Egypt, Libya, and Syria. It goes on to say that Barack Obama plans his next war, and it's going to be with Iran, as he fires or demotes his generals that get in the way. Well, I find it rather sad that a Russian newspaper is clearly able to make the connection to Soviet-style communism, making such a strong debut in our Oval Office, while they themselves are moving further and further away from true socialism. They're still moving in a direction of a dictatorial-style government, but they're moving away from a socialism. Ordinarily, that would have been the part that would have caught my eye and would have been the most insulting, because, as you know, I refer to Barack Obama as the occupier, because I believe that the voting fraud was so substantial and so large that there's just no realistic way that the man actually won the most recent election. There are other folks out there who are threatening to bring forth a petition for impeachment against the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts, should he go through with swearing Obama in for his second term, based on their assertion that Obama does not qualify to be president based on his citizenship status. The threat being that, as someone who's taken the oath to protect and defend the Constitution, as the Chief Justice has, that it would be his responsibility to make sure that, per the Constitution, that the occupier legally can hold the office. So, by failing to do so and going ahead and swearing him in, he's in fact violating his own oath and therefore eligible for impeachment. Now, this group, of course, is lovingly referred to in mainstream media as birthers, another derogatory term, so that we can just throw them off to the side and pretend that they're not relevant because there's some fringe element of some conspiracy theorist, loony bin escapees. Anytime the media tries so hard to discount and disclude a group of people like that, that's at least one reason why you might ought to want to pay some attention to what they have to say. Beyond that, what really caught my eye is the fact that Again, the Russians, who are still assisting Iran politically and financially, would say that the hugger and giver of ice cream and cash and weapons of mass destruction, in fact, is going around promoting wars. And if you take a look at the list, he seems to have a point, helped to create a coup, putting the Muslim Brotherhood in charge of Egypt, who did have a dictator, but Mubarak was at least a pro-American dictator and someone who understood that peace with Israel was in the best interest of him, his people, and the world as a whole. So, not a big fan of dictators, don't get me wrong, but at least this particular dictator was a relatively safe one to have in that position. I don't think we can say the same thing about the Muslim Brotherhood. Libya, same deal. The wild man of Libya, the dictator who was in power there, once was brave and bold and even tried to face off with Ronald Reagan. But in recent years, if you'll recall, our friend in Libya, the ever-lovable dictator, was actually extremely compliant and was working towards getting full sanctions removed and was allowing full and unfettered access by the UN's nuclear watchdog agency, and they had went out of their way. He had basically become a non-threat. He no longer was committing great acts of violence against his people, or at least if he was, he'd gotten much, much better at hiding it. Again, not a big fan of dictators, especially dictators that tried to take cheap shots at American soldiers, American crew and fighter pilots. I don't take kindly to it, but at this point in time, he'd pretty much been neutered and he was no longer a threat. So what do? We do support an overthrow in which we know that a large number of Al-Qaeda have rose to significant power. And then the whole situation in Syria, we've been recruiting in Egypt and Libya fighters to go fight in the Syrian civil war. Okay, those actually would not be a civil war if you're fighting foreign fighters, would it? Especially foreign fighters armed with American weapons that have been provided by the current occupier. All that's legitimate, but the fact that Russia's able to pick up on that and clearly state it when our own mainstream media won't also raises an eyebrow. But what really catches my attention here is he's planning a war with Iran. Well, that would almost be counterproductive with everything else that we've seen to this point, until you really stop and take a look at the fact that Iran and Syria are pretty close, and they both do a lot of state-sponsored terrorism. If you take out the regimes in Syria and in Iran, certainly Hezbollah loses a lot of money, power, and influence. Hezbollah is a competitor in a lot of ways with Al-Qaeda, so maybe we're just picking Al-Qaeda's side on this. But planning a war on Iran, and then as soon as I read this, I've been seeing it pop up in some other places. But I probably would completely discount that in and of itself if it wasn't for the fact that I came across a couple of other stories. One of them extremely frightening, if it's true. But I'm going to continue with this next story, because this next story should be enough to get everyone riled up anyway. We are already the victims of a cyber jihad. Well, the story headline posted, Iran steps up its cyber attacks on U.S. financial institutions. And this was posted January 6, 2013. Iran is continuing aggressive cyber attacks against U.S. financial institutions, and officials say the U.S. government has failed to take steps to even halt the electronic strikes. The sophisticated denial of service that's a tongue twister. Well, at least for me, anyway. Easy for me to say, right? The sophisticated denial of service cyber attacks have been underway for several months, in fact, and involve I'm about to have to just try this one all over again. They involve several Iranian-originated hackers who flood banking and financial institution websites with massive login attempts that disrupt or halt remote banking services. Quote, they are going after the same types of sites, an intelligence official familiar with the reports on the attacks said. The official criticized the occupiers' administration for failing to protect American corporations from what the official said are state-sponsored cyber attacks. Critics in the government and the private sector say the U.S. government remains unprepared to unresponsive, and certainly unprepared to respond to such coordinated covert cyber attacks. Several government agencies, including the military's U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. intelligence agencies, and the Department of Homeland Security, along with the FBI, are responsible for dealing with cyber attacks. Yet, the White House is in charge of directing any counterattacks on nation states, and so far has refused to authorize any aggressive action, such as retaliatory counter-cyber attacks. I don't know that would be the way to go, or if it would do any good, considering there are like 2 banks in Iran. Okay, I'm exaggerating. The intelligence official also suggested that the administration is reluctant to take action because the president's conciliatory policies towards Iran. The occupier failed to back Iran's democratic opposition in 2009 and has taken limited diplomatic action against Iran's illicit nuclear program. The administration appears to be treating the Iranian cyber attacks as a law enforcement matter rather than covert warfare. The White House National Security Council spokesperson Tommy Valeter declined to comment when asked why the administration has failed to respond to the attacks. FBI spokeswoman Jennifer Scheer also declined to comment on what she said were ongoing matters. The hackers called the attacks Operation Abera and stepped up their efforts. In fact, they stepped up efforts just this last week, prompting PNC Bank to warn customers about the disruption. PNC Bank disclosed in a statement January 3rd that a number of U.S. banks, including PNC, were dealing with unusually high volume of traffic in their internet connections. This volume of traffic is consistent with threatened cyber attacks on the U.S. banking system and is designed to cause access delays for legitimate internet customers. The bank said that some customers have been unable to conduct business remotely as a result of the security efforts to mitigate the attacks. The bank sought to assure customers that the website is protected by, quote, a sophisticated encryption strategies.